welcome onto the stage Kurt Harrison, Partner and Managing Director, Russell Reynolds Associates, and the panelist of the session, which is Scaling Up Finance to Support the World's Transformation. Please welcome Kurt.
There. Well, thank you, Tanya. It's great to be here, and thank you all for being here as well. I'm Kurt Harrison, and I feel very honored to be here today and also moderating such an incredibly impressive panel of speakers. So I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to introduce to you our wonderful panel here today. Directly to my left, your right, is François Villeroy de Galhau. As you probably know, François is the governor of the Banque de France, a very important and high-level position held by a very important and high-level individual. He has been governor of the Banque de France since November 2015 and was reappointed to a second term just last year. Earlier this year, Governor Villeroy was also appointed chair of the Board of Directors for the Banque for International Settlements, François Villeroy de Galhau. You can clap if you want. Yeah. Next is Diony Lebot, based here in Paris. Diony is the Deputy CEO of Société Générale. Obviously, many of you are very familiar with Société Générale. Not only is she Deputy CEO at the group level, she is also responsible for all of their ESG policies globally, and she also leads the group financial services and insurance activities across the organization. So please welcome Diony Lebot. Next is Noelle Aljaweini, who is here from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where she is the Chief of Cash Markets for the Saudi Exchange. She basically runs all of the Saudi Exchange's cash markets trading businesses, as well as all of their product development. So please welcome Noelle Aljaweini. And at the other end of the podium is our good friend John Calla-Leacy. John is based in London, where he is the global head of ESG for KPMG International. Obviously, these accounting and consulting firms are huge drivers of the world's transformation, and so he's a very important person to have here on the panel. He is their global and UK head for ESG and has been with the firm for over 21 years. Please welcome John Calla-Leacy. So given that we are all here to discuss how we're going to scale up finance to support the world's transformation, I thought we would begin the discussion today with Governor Villeroy, because if we're really going to do that, it's going to require a very active collaboration between the public and the private sectors around the world. So, Governor Villeroy, in your position as the governor of the Banque de France, what kinds of actions are central banks taking now to really drive the world's transformation?
Thank you very much, Kurt. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Good afternoon to everybody. Let me first say how delighted I am to be invited in the Women's Forum. It's my first participation, by the way. I strongly hope it won't be the last one, but this is a personal wish this afternoon. Trying to answer this very ambitious title we have, the world's transformation. It's not such a small or easy task. Let me insist on the paradox about the role of finance. Because if we had had this meeting, let's say 10 years ago, it would have been seen as not credible at all. And finance is usually seen, probably still today, as greedy, short-termist, and sometimes it can be greedy and short-termist. But it's not only that. And how can we use finance for the world's transformation? Again, if we were 10 years ago, probably the word green finance were seen as an oxymoron. I don't know even if they existed. Now green finance is very fashionable, perhaps a bit too much. I will elaborate on that. There are many other aspects of the word transformation. We could speak about impact finance. We could speak, obviously, about the promising role of women in the economy. But let me focus on climate change in your question. And first, perhaps say what finance and central banks cannot do. There could be an illusion, I'm a bit cautious about that finance alone could address climate change and transform the world. No, the fight against global warming is also up to governments, to public policy, to all of us as citizens in our personal behaviors, and to corporates and business. And this is very important. If you take an issue like the price of carbon, we need difficult, courageous public policy. That said, finance, and especially we central banks, must do everything we can do to fight climate change. As I usually say, it's not nice to have. Some years ago, climate change belonged to CSR policies. Now, for financial institutions, it's key in risk management, and for us, Banque de France, it's a key responsibility. To give you a very practical flavor, Kurt, when I arrived at the Banque de France 7 years ago, as you said, there were probably less than 10 people dealing with climate change. Now there are almost 100. And it's not due to my arrival. I'm sincerely committed, but it shows how we accelerated. What did we do practically, not to be too long? First, we created 5 years ago, 2017, a network of central banks as supervisors to address climate change. It's called NGFS, Network for Greening the Financial System. It's based in Paris. One of the founding mothers was Nathalie Auffaut, who is still our representative in this NGFS. And the secretariat, the global secretariat, is run by another woman from the Banque de France, Bertille Delavaux. We started at 8. We are now 120 members. And believe me, we are very enthusiastic. I stress it because sometimes, perhaps when you think of central bankers, you don't think of enthusiasm. Believe me, central bankers can be enthusiastic, and we proved it. And then to describe you, I will stop afterwards, 3 practical steps we took afterwards. First, we were the first central bank in Europe to change our investment policy, to publish a responsible investment report 3 years ago, and to have all our non-monetary portfolio consistent with the 1.5-degree objective. And this was a very significant change. It's always the same story. When you are a central bank, start with yourself, lead by exemplarity. Last year, we were the first central bank to run what is called a climate stress test. I don't want to be boring and technical, but it's a very simple idea that we supervise financial institutions, banks and insurance. They are obliged by law to disclose, Diony will perhaps elaborate on that, to disclose their existing climate risk. And again, because we think that it's a must-have, climate risk is part of financial risk. But stress test is a very powerful instrument to project what this risk could become till 2050, in the next 30 years. It's very important because climate risk is a long-term risk. It raises many methodological questions, but we are learning by doing, and now more than 36 jurisdictions around the world run such stress tests. And last episode is just this week, yesterday. It's by chance, I'm honest, but we published yesterday our first global comprehensive report on our climate commitments, so-called TCFD report, including not only our supervision, not only our monetary policy, but also all our other missions, and all our internal processes, because we are committed, to give an example, to be carbon neutral at the end of this decade, so 2030. So we have not run the race, yet it's obvious. And unfortunately, global warming is also accelerating. But as I am now a quite wise man, you can see it at my age, can I share one conviction? I never saw in my long professional career a cause which changed, accelerated so dramatically as this collective commitment against climate change. And believe me, we will not stop there.
Thank you, Governor Villeroy. The Banque de France is certainly setting a great example for central banks around the world. You know, digging down more granularity into that, Diony, in your role as Deputy CEO of Société Générale, what are the sort of the things that you're seeing about finance, and how can finance really have the capacity to drive and transform our world by having a positive impact on societies and economies?
It's a broad question, a great question, and Governor Villeroy de Galhau helped me by saying finance cannot alone transform the world, that's for sure. But finance does have immense power, and it has a very important role to play, in particular in the climate change and fighting this very important cause. So how can finance do it? First of all, we are at the heart of the economy. So first of all, we can direct financing and allocate financial flows to this transition. And we are speaking about amounts of really unprecedented magnitude. Just the energy transition, it is more than $2 trillion a year until 2030. So it's huge. So finance will have an important role in increasing financing to this transition. Second, also very important, and the governor has mentioned it, it is about managing risks. It's about acting responsibly. And what banks have done is really taking into account the scenarios, 1.5 degree scenarios, net zero scenarios, to progressively align their activities to the right trajectory, to a more sustainable development, a more sustainable world. And that means most European banks, for instance, have decided to exit coal or to phase out coal. But we will go beyond that, and there is this big alliance, which is called the Net Zero Banking Alliance, more than 100 banks, who committed to align all their activities, all their portfolio, because our impact on climate is through our clients' impact, to align our portfolio sector after sector to these trajectories of net zero. And this is difficult work, actually, because it's, we're not in the business of exiting clients, but it means, in some cases, difficult decisions, projects we will no longer finance, and clients we progressively are going to ask to align. And by putting this pressure on clients, on suppliers, I think this is also enabling the transition, and this is certainly what regulators and supervisors are aiming at by really pushing this regulation, stress test, because then banks and finance can identify the risks and manage accordingly. So first, increase financing. Second, reduce negative impact and align trajectories. But this is almost the easy part. I think the most difficult part is not to green finance. I think we know how to do it. It's really to green the economy. And the economy is not green, it's not decarbonized. Today, it is rather on a path of 2.5 degrees and not 1.5 degrees. So it means that we need to accelerate, and we need to really scale up the efforts. So I think the most important role the banks and finance can play is really working with clients, with the industry players, and accompany them in their transition. So it will require huge resources, it will require deep expertise, and personally, I think it requires mostly collective effort. It means coalitions, like the one I mentioned within the banking sector, Net Zero Banking Alliance, but also coalitions with the industry players in each sector, because this is how concretely we will understand the challenges, the stakes, and be able to find the innovative solutions which are needed. And I will take just one example, because it's one very close to my heart, because I supervise mobility also within the Société Générale. When we speak about transforming mobility, it means concretely working with very different type of players. Car manufacturers, because they need to produce electric cars. It's gigafactories. We need to produce the batteries. Is recycling also plants, because we will not have enough lithium and raw materials. And also, it's changing the consumers' behaviors. It's making also this transition of people using cars rather than owning them, but also using in a more flexible way cars and mobility. So it takes really a whole chain to transform, and we as banks and as finance, we deal with all these players. They are our clients, they are our partners, and we are hence, I think, in this role of enabling and accompanying and supporting the transition.
Yeah, Diony, I love how you organize that and mention specific examples, having a solutions orientation, having a collaborative approach with industry players, and the public and private partnership that Governor Villeroy mentioned earlier. So I'm glad there's consistency between the banking sector and the central bank here. Yeah, John, anything to add to that?
Yeah, can I just come in just briefly? So we were talking earlier, and I mentioned that I just recently returned from Egypt at COP27, and it was really interesting comparing and contrasting COP27 with COP26. 26 often talked about as being the COP of commitment, whereby targets were set to get to net zero. I think pre-COP26, there was about 30% of global GDP had net zero or net zero related targets. Post-COP26, that rise to 90%. Now, Egypt was really focused on taking those commitments and going from intent into implementation. And exactly, Diony, as you mentioned, we saw one of the announcements by the UN, $150 billion of projects have been specifically identified by the UN. So these are projects which if private investors invest into, it has the capacity to drive real transformational change, to drive adaptation, to lower emissions. Just briefly, just one other point I mentioned, because this is really significant. Prior to Egypt, and this was referenced again by Joe Biden, again in COP27, the US announced the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, when you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, initial estimates talk to about 369 billion of investment into greening the economy, as you mentioned. Now, our assessment is that number is probably quite understated. Why? Because some of the tax incentives are uncapped, and also when you layer on top private investment, the likely number is going to be over $1 trillion. And we know now that here in the EU, there are similar conversations around what the EU's response should be to the Inflation Reduction Act. Why am I saying this all? I'm saying this because we see the US over $1 trillion. We see in EU's their response and elsewhere, a significant amount of finance will be unleashed right across the economy. It's not going fast enough at the moment. We need to accelerate this. The key question is just ensuring that it is distributed in a fair and equitable way. Right now, certainly for females, we know that just a stat I read, which is unbelievable. If women took the same role in the labour market as men, this would add circa 26% to global GDP. That's $28 trillion. So it's about when this is unleashed, it will happen, making sure it happens quickly and making sure that it is distributed in an equitable way.
Yeah, these are exciting times. I mean, a lot happening around the world, all leading in the right direction, but it's going to require activation, integration, execution to really make these things happen, driven by finance and the people you see on the stage in front of you here today. Noelle, question for you. In your role at the Saudi Exchange. You've been a long-time advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, but in a very commercial context. How do you see global sustainable development supporting and driving women and girls' empowerment?
Thanks, Kurt. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to speak about this topic, which is very close to my heart. I think what's really important for us to note is that women come to the table and they bring fresh ideas, they come with concerns, and they come with real issues. And this opens up the door to opportunity, and it opens up the door of economic growth. Now, having done this, I think it's important to note that significant investment needs to be made in this space. Policy change needs to be done in this space, and we need not be shy about it. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there has been tremendous reform under the Kingdom's Vision 2030, which is a socio-economic transformation plan. Women empowerment is at the heart of this. And we've seen tremendous change since its launch in 2016. Under the Vision 2030, its targets are set out to bring up women empowerment and women participation in the workforce from 22% to 30%. And I'm very happy to say that as of March 2022, this number is above 33% today. At the Saudi Exchange, we're nearly 30% in women employment. Women represent 30% of our workforce, and we are happy to be led by a very prominent female figure who is the chairperson of our board, Ms. Sara Sahami. And in doing so, this trickles down the organization and leads into specific initiatives, empowering women and providing opportunities for these women. But this has to start from the top, from policy level. So an example for this is the Saudi Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development. And you can see just from its name itself, the latter part of this is social development, which is really focused on developing local talent and increasing employment rates. The ministry has launched several programs. Under these programs, there are some that are specifically targeted towards women. So, for example, the ministry's Tamhir program covers 80% of transportation costs for women. The ministry supports an on-the-ground training for women. The ministry supports with childcare for women who are working professionals. And these things are really, really important because in the long term, this unlocks long-term opportunities, and companies and organizations need to really look beyond the balance sheet today for value that can be created years down the line, and we're already seeing these benefits reap. The Saudi Exchange was the first company in Saudi Arabia to sign the UN Sustainable Development Agreement. And we're very proud to be a part of this, and we're very proud to pioneer this, because as an infrastructure provider, listed companies look at you for direction, they look at you for guidance, and they look at you to lead by example. We are a listed company ourselves, just of late, and it's very important that we focus our efforts and communicate our efforts and build a sense of community around this, and be transparent in our dialogue, and be very, very clear on what we're doing for others to also follow and be encouraged to do so.
That's an excellent summary. Diony, in your role as one of the most senior women in finance in all of France, if not the world, what are some of the things that Société Générale are doing in this regard?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think there is not one single action which is needed, and I really like all the examples you gave, because it means that you really need to be very consistent when you really want to empower women and make sure that you achieve the diversity. So if I have to really give one very important thing we do at Société Générale is really consider that diversity and gender diversity, among others, is a business priority. It means that we consider that diversity drives performance, it drives client satisfaction, it drives talent attractiveness, and it has to manage as such. You have to make it really the priority of managers, because when managers have to meet business goals, they find the solutions, they are accountable for delivering, and this is how it has to be done, because it's very different to promote women and give them opportunities in markets activities or in French retail or in other activities. So really I think it's making it a business priority, be very consistent, and make sure you embed this target of diversity in everything you do, in all of your processes, hiring, promotion, succession planning. And I agree with what you said, is that the world of today is so complex. It requires really innovative and new ways, fresh ways of approaching things. So we need a diverse environment. And it's, of course, a diverse environment means inclusion of women.
Yeah, it's not only the smart thing to do, but it's this commercially smart thing to do in addition to being the right thing to do. I think statistics show that diverse and equitable work environments are more productive, more commercially successful, and everyone's happier. You're able to attract and retain best-in-class talent if your organization has a mission orientation and is known for being very progressive around diversity and inclusion. So thank you for that clarification. John, speaking of diversity and inclusion, how can, in your role at KPMG, you get to see a lot. You're advising clients around the world on these themes. In many cases, you'll hear the catchphrase that diversity is the hardware and inclusion is the software to really make it happen. How can the financial field and finance in general become more diverse and inclusive, offering career opportunities to women around the world?
Okay, no, fantastic question. And first of all, what I'd say in terms of framing the extent of the issue, which is substantial. There's about 1 billion women around the world that have no access to financial services. I mean, as I even say that, I shudder. It's really, really poor. We need to do better. So, first of all, and I'll frame this with 3 points: data, data, and data. Just the importance of having data, having actionable information in making, really important changes. So, from a government perspective, for those 1 billion women around the world, what we need to understand, what we need to be clear about, is we need to identify which women are financially excluded. Why are they financially excluded? And we need to, from a governmental level, have policies in place to set about changing that and to do it quickly. But as you referenced before, it's not just a good thing to do as much as it is. It also makes business sense. So therefore, from a business perspective, business needs to understand that also. There's potentially 1 billion clients out there that they could be providing services to, which they're not doing right now. Businesses need to really look at how accessible their products and their services are right now. One of the things that I talk about quite a lot is ensuring the importance of inclusive design. So ensuring that the products, the services that they have are designed with their end customer in mind, and that end customer is truly representative of the communities in which they serve. That's really important. I'd say what's important also, and effectively what enables or supports inclusive design, is having the right voices around the table. I'll go back again. When I was in COP, we had I won't go into now, a very technical discussion around blended finance and what we needed to do to accelerate the adoption of public and private finance. And somebody partway through the discussion said, hey, we're just all finance people around the table talking to finance people. And they were absolutely right. we shouldn't be doing that. We should ensure that women and girls and all characteristics are included in the design of these products, which is really, really important. A couple more things, because I know we're running out of time briefly. What I would say also is really important is that where we can do in business, we should seek to target where we can provide seed capital to women. We know that women who are entrepreneurs typically receive less funding than men, and we should also provide seed capital or philanthropic support to those businesses or those organizations, I would say, who are at the grassroots and then who are specifically focused on inclusion, financial inclusion for women.
Yeah, I love the idea and the concept of inclusive design. That was a new concept and terminology for me, but I think you explained it really well, so thank you for sharing that. So we're bumping up on time here. We could talk all day with this incredible panel. I'd like to ask all of the speakers one final question, and we'll go in reverse order. So John, you'll kick this off and work it back towards me. If there was one key action or one recommendation you would give to the people in the audience here today that they can take with them and go back to their organizations, back to their communities, and really implement that and integrate that into those organizations, what would that one key action or recommendation be?
Okay, from my side, simply put, follow the money.
He's an accountant, so we'll give him that.
Right, so maybe I'll expand on that a little bit. In government, in business, and from your own personal perspective, follow the money. What I mean by that, consider your investments, consider your pensions. If you have a senior role in business, consider your staff wage bill. And the key question is, to what extent do all of these investments empower women and girls, and to what extent are they consistent with delivering a fair and equitable society that we've just discussed? And if they're not, change them.
Right, and there's a big untapped pool of talent and clients right in the audience here today. So, Noelle.
Yeah, I would probably categorize my key message into maybe two areas. First of all, communication. So when organizations communicate their targets, communicate their ambitions, naturally members of this organization feel more included in the path that these organizations are taking. The second element is that of, back to what John was mentioning, is following the money. Significant weight is placed by institutional investors on how well companies are doing with ESG efforts. And as companies develop their ESG efforts, create a more inclusive environment, create more sustainable environment and performance, investors really care about this, and money and investment starts to flow in. So I would say those are my two takeaways.
Excellent, very consistent across the panel here. So Diony.
Yeah, I think both are very important. I will take just a slightly different perspective. I think that the change at hand is so immense. It's really a change in paradigm, something we have never seen before in our lives. So I think it takes really to start with a purpose. So if I had one key recommendation, is really to define the purpose of your company, and then align everything across this purpose. So at Société Générale, we have a purpose which is building together with our clients a more sustainable and better world through innovative and responsible solutions. And once we defined this purpose, it was much easier really to align everything: strategy, business decisions, processes, the way we do business every day. And then when you have the right purpose, you attract the right people and they make it happen.
Yeah. Governor Villeroy, you kicked off an amazing panel discussion today, so thank you. Parting words and recommendations for the group here today.
I wouldn't dare giving a recommendation to such an audience, but perhaps express a wish. Please go on. The world's transformation needs you. Finance scale-up needs you. And let give me two illustrations, very modest ones. The first is not from myself, it's from Christine Lagarde. I'm lucky enough to have a female as president in the ECB. And you remember that the great financial crisis 14 years ago started with the failure of Lehman Brothers. And Christine used to say, if Lehman Brothers would have been Lehman sisters, the catastrophe would have been avoided. Very difficult to explain, but right.
We probably need brothers and sisters.
And second, it's, as I just said, very difficult to define what women bring in business and in finance. But let me try to elaborate from my very personal view. I think what you bring is helping us, men, to replace or by and. And let me explain. Men have probably a tendency to consider that success is personal. Either it's my success or it's yours. What you bring is this feeling of coalition. We have success together, and we badly need coalitions, as Diony said, to fight climate change and to increase impact. Or to give another example, men have probably a tendency to think that it's either P&L or ESG, either profit or purpose. And I think you bring sometimes, you help us to have what I would call a committed realism, to say that the future belongs to the firms which will have together P&L and ESG. Good luck and thank you.
Thank you all. Tanya?
Kurt, thank you so much, and thank you to your amazing, esteemed panelists. It's been wonderful to listen to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Wonderful.